I always knew my mother's love came with conditions, but I never expected the price tag to be attached to my daughter's diploma. The applause for Haley's honors graduation had barely faded when Marlene interrupted our celebratory dinner, not with a toast, but with an ultimatum. "Start paying rent tomorrow," she said, staring us down from the head of the table. In that frozen silence, I realized 18 years of playing by her rules had bought us absolutely nothing. The wooden stairs leading up to the second floor of the duplex always groaned under my weight. A sound that had become the soundtrack of my failure. Every evening at 6:30, after I finished my shift at the dental office and before I started my remote transcription work, that creak reminded me of where I was. I was 33 years old, I was a mother, and I was still living in my mother's house. We lived in Larkhill, Pennsylvania, a suburb that felt like it was perpetually holding its breath, waiting for property values to either skyrocket or crash. My mother, Marlene, owned the duplex. She lived in the pristine, plastic-covered downstairs unit, while my daughter Haley and I occupied the upstairs. It was supposed to be temporary. That was the word we used 7 years ago when my marriage dissolved into a puddle of debt and lawyers. Temporary, but the years had a way of hardening around us like concrete. Today, however, the stairs did not bother me. Today, the gray siding of the house did not look so dreary, and the smell of impending rain felt like a cleansing wash rather than a gloomy threat. It was graduation day. I adjusted the collar of my dress in the hallway mirror. It was the same navy blue dress I had worn to my brother's wedding 5 years ago, but I had accessorized it with a new scarf. I looked tired. I knew that. The dark circles under my eyes were stubborn passengers that no amount of concealer could evict, but my eyes themselves were bright. Haley was graduating. Not just graduating, but graduating with honors. When we arrived at the high school gymnasium, the air was thick with the scent of floor wax and cheap perfume. The bleachers were packed with families fanning themselves with programs. I sat next to my Aunt Joan, who squeezed my hand so hard her rings dug into my skin. "There she is," Joan whispered, pointing toward the sea of maroon gowns. I saw her. Haley walked with a straight spine. Her chin lifted just slightly. She looked so much older than 18. She looked capable. When they called her name, Haley Marie Griffin, and announced her status as an honors graduate. The applause that erupted from my chest felt like it might crack a rib. I screamed her name. I didn't care who stared. But the real moment, the one that made my knees weak with relief, happened afterward in the parking lot. Haley ran up to me, her gown billowing in the wind, clutching a thick envelope against her chest. "Mom," she gasped, her face flushed with a joy I had not seen in years. "I got it. I actually got it." She handed me the letter. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It was from Barton Lake University. It was a scholarship, a real, substantial scholarship that covered tuition and a significant portion of housing. I pulled her into me, burying my face in her hair that smelled of vanilla hairspray. "You did it," I whispered. "You are going to fly. Haley, you are going to fly so far away from here." It felt like the finish line of a marathon I had been running barefoot over broken glass. The financial fear that had lived in my throat for a decade began to loosen. She was safe. She was leaving Larkhill. She was going to have the life I missed out on. We drove back to the duplex in high spirits. Marlene was hosting a celebratory dinner downstairs. I had bought a bottle of sparkling cider and a cake from the bakery that cost more than my weekly gas budget. But it did not matter. This was the night we turned the page. The dining room downstairs was set with the good china, the plates with the gold rims that we were forbidden from touching when I was a child. My brother Derek was there, sitting at the far end of the table, scrolling on his phone. His wife, Tessa, sat next to him, her posture rigid, her eyes darting around the room as if she were looking for an exit. Aunt Joan was already pouring wine, her laugh loud and a little too sharp. Marlene emerged from the kitchen carrying a pot roast. My mother was a small woman, but she took up a lot of space. She had hair that was dyed a ferocious shade of auburn and eyes that missed nothing. "Sit," Marlene commanded. placing the roast in the center of the table. We sat. The mood was lighter than usual. Even Derek, who usually treated family gatherings like a court sentencing, offered Haley a tight smile. "Good job, kid," Derek said. "Barton Lake. That is a fancy school." "Thanks, Uncle Derek," Haley said, beaming. I still cannot believe it. We ate in relative peace for 20 minutes. I allowed myself to relax. I watched my daughter eat, watched the way the light caught the gold honor cord still draped around her neck. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the room temperature. Then, Marlene tapped her fork against her wine glass. The sharp ting-ting-ting cut through the conversation. "I would like to make a toast," Marlene said. We all raised our glasses. I lifted my water, smiling at my mother, expecting a rare moment of maternal pride. "To Haley," Marlene began, her voice steady, "for finishing high school. We are all glad you managed to get through it without getting into trouble." It was a backhanded compliment, classic Marlene, but I let it slide. "To Haley." We chorused. Marlene did not sit down. She remained standing, her fingers gripping the stem of her glass. She looked at Haley, then at me, and then back to Haley. "And now that you are technically an adult," Marlene continued, her tone shifting from ceremonial to businesslike, "it is time to talk about the real world. You have done well in school." Haley, "But school is not life. In this family, we value contribution. We value pulling our own weight." I felt a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. Derek smirked, looking down at his plate. Tessa reached for her water glass, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. "So," Marlene said, taking a sip of wine, "I have decided that if you intend to stay under this roof for the summer before you go off to that college, things are going to change. You will start paying rent tomorrow." The room froze. It was as if she had sucked all the oxygen out of the space. I blinked, sure I had misheard. "Rent? Excuse me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Rent, Claire," Marlene said, turning her gaze to me. "She is 18. She is an adult. Adults pay for the roof over their heads." Aunt Joan let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Oh, Marlene, stop teasing the poor girl. It is her graduation night." "I am not teasing," Marlene said, her face completely devoid of humor. $600 a month, due on the 1st. Since tomorrow is the 25th, I will prorate the first week." Haley dropped her fork. It clattered against the china, the sound echoing like a gunshot. She looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion and humiliation. "Mom?" Haley whispered. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but anger was beginning to burn through the shock. "Mom, this is ridiculous," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "She is 18. She just graduated 3 hours ago. She has a part-time job at the library that pays minimum wage. She is saving every penny for her books and living expenses at Barton Lake. Then she can work more hours," Marlene said, sitting down and cutting a piece of meat. "Or she can find a second job, like you did. It builds character." Derek let out a short, dry chuckle. "Welcome to the real world. Haley, nothing is free." I looked at my brother. He was 40, drove a truck he could barely afford, and had borrowed money from Marlene more times than I could count. The hypocrisy made my stomach turn. "Derek, shut up," I snapped. "Claire," Marlene barked, "do not speak to your brother that way." "You are asking a high school student to pay rent to her own grandmother?" I demanded, my voice rising. "We live upstairs. We pay for our own food. I pay a portion of the utilities. I buy the cleaning supplies. What more do you want from us?" "I want respect," Marlene said, slamming her hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "I want to know that I'm not raising another generation of freeloaders. You lived here for free for 6 months when you came crawling back after the divorce. I carried you. I will not carry another capable adult. Freeloader." The word hung in the air. Ugly and unfair. I worked 50 hours a week. I had never asked her for a dime since I got back on my feet. I stayed in the duplex because she said she needed help with the maintenance, because she said she wanted family clothes. Haley pushed her chair back. Her face was bright red. I will pay it, Haley said, her voice shaking. No, you will not. I said firmly, I will, Haley insisted, tears welling in her eyes. I have some savings. I can pick up extra shifts. I do not want to be a burden. Grandma, you are not a burden, I told her, grabbing her hand. You are a granddaughter. You are a student. Marlene reached under the table and pulled out a manila folder. She slid it across the lace tablecloth toward Haley. Here is the agreement, Marlene said. I typed it up this morning. I stared at the folder. She had typed it up, this morning, while I was ironing my dress, while Haley was putting on her cap and gown. Marlene had sat at her computer and drafted a lease. I snatched the folder before Haley could touch it. I opened it. It was a formal document, formatted with bold headers and numbered lists. Tenant, Haley Griffin. Landlord, Marlene Griffin. Monthly rent, $600. But it was not just about the money. I scanned the paragraphs. Clause 4. Curfew. Tenant must be inside the premises by 10 in the evening on weeknights and midnight on weekends. Clause 7. Guests. No overnight guests permitted under any circumstances. Daytime guests must be approved 24 hours in advance. Clause 9. Noise. Quiet hours begin at 9 in the evening. This was not a rental agreement. This was a prison sentence disguised as a contract. It was about control. It was about clipping Haley's wings before she even had a chance to test them. This is insane, I said, tossing the folder back onto the table. She is not signing this. Then she can find somewhere else to live. Marlene said coolly. Tessa looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Joan was aggressively buttering a roll, refusing to look at anyone. Haley stood up, a single tear tracking down her cheek. May I be excused? She asked. Go, I said. Go upstairs. Haley fled the room. I heard her footsteps pounding up the stairs. The same stairs that had felt so light earlier that day. I looked at my mother. She was calmly eating her roast beef. You have ruined this day, I said, my voice trembling with rage. You waited for the happiest moment of her life to do this. Why? Responsibility. Claire, Marlene said without looking up, you will thank me later. She needs to learn that the world does not hand you scholarships just for being special. She needs to understand the value of $1. She understands it better than you do. I said, she has been working since she was 16. Marlene waved her fork dismissively. Pocket money. Real money is rent. Real money is bills. If she wants to live under this family's roof, she pays. End of discussion. I looked at Derek. He was studying me with a look of amusement, as if this were a reality TV show he was enjoying. You knew about this, I said to him. Derek shrugged. Mom talks to me. She is worried about expenses. Things are tight. You would not know. Living in your bubble upstairs. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I could not stay in that airless, toxic space for another second. I went upstairs to our unit. The living room was dark. I found Haley in her bedroom, sitting on the edge of her bed, still in her graduation dress. She had taken off the honor cord and thrown it on the floor. Honey, I said, sitting beside her, I can pay it. Mom, she said, wiping her eyes. I did the math. If I work weekends and 3 nights a week, I can make the $600. I won't be able to save much for the meal plan at Barton. You are not paying her rent, I said. We will figure this out. We can look for a small apartment, maybe a studio. In Larkhill? Haley asked. For 2 months? Who is going to lease to us for just the summer? And we cannot afford a deposit and first month's rent right now. You just paid for the car repairs. She was right. The transmission on my 10-year-old sedan had died 2 months ago, wiping out my emergency fund. We were trapped. I hugged her. Just let me handle Grandma. Do not sign anything. Promise me. I promise, she said. I left her to change and went into my small kitchen. I needed to think. I needed to understand why Marlene was doing this. My mother was difficult. Yes, she was controlling. Absolutely. But this felt different. This felt desperate. The typed contract, the specificity of the amount, the timing. It was not just cruel, it was calculated. I paced the small floor. $600. Why $600? Marlene's mortgage had been paid off years ago. She bragged about it constantly. She only paid property taxes and utilities. I decided to take the trash out. I needed fresh air. I grabbed the bag from under the sink and walked down the back stairs, bypassing the internal door that connected our unit to Marlene's kitchen. Outside, the evening air was cooling. The streetlights of Lark Hill were flickering on. As I walked to the curb to deposit the trash bag in the bin, a voice called out from the darkness of the neighboring porch. "Claire, is that you?" It was Mrs. Pennington, our next-door neighbor. She was a woman in her 70s who spent most of her time gardening and watching the neighborhood through her front blinds. "Hi, Mrs. Pennington," I said, forcing a polite tone. "I saw Haley in her cap and gown earlier," Mrs. Pennington said, leaning over the low fence that separated our yards. "She looked beautiful. Did everything go well?" "Yes," I said. "She graduated with honors. That is wonderful," Mrs. Pennington said. She paused. "I heard some shouting earlier. Is everything all right?" "The walls between the houses are not as thick as they used to be. Just a family disagreement," I said. "You know how it is." Mrs. Pennington hesitated. She looked around the empty street, then leaned in closer. "Claire, I do not want to pry, but is Marlene in some kind of trouble?" I frowned. "Trouble? What do you mean?" Mrs. Pennington lowered her voice. "I was out weeding my hydrangeas yesterday morning. The window to Marlene's kitchen was open. I heard her on the phone. She sounded upset." "Upset about what?" I asked, stepping closer to the fence. "She was yelling at someone," Mrs. Pennington said. "She kept saying, 'I cannot make the deadline, and the bank has to understand.' And then she mentioned something about, well, she said, 'If I lose the house, I lose everything.'" A cold chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. "The bank?" I asked. "But the house is paid off." "That is what I thought," Mrs. Pennington said. But she sounded scared. "Claire, really scared. And then today, I saw a man in a suit walking around the property while you were all at the graduation. He was taking pictures with a tablet. He didn't look like a friend." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A man taking pictures. Marlene screaming about a deadline. "Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Pennington," I said. I walked back toward the house, my mind racing. Marlene had said this was about responsibility. She had said it was about teaching Haley a lesson. But if Mrs. Pennington was right, the rent wasn't a lesson, it was a lifeline. Marlene needed money, fast. I went into the shared foyer where the mail was kept. Usually, Marlene grabbed the mail the second the carrier arrived. She was territorial about it, but with the graduation chaos, she might have missed today's delivery. I sorted through the stack on the small table. Junk mail, a catalog for gardening supplies, a flyer for a pizza place, and then I saw it. It was a standard business envelope, but the red ink stamped on the front caught my eye. Final notice. It was addressed to Marlene Griffin, but it wasn't from the utility company or the water board. The return address read, Harbor Crest Lending. I had never heard of Harbor Crest Lending. I knew I shouldn't open it. It was a federal offense to open someone else's mail. But the memory of Haley's tear-stained face and the smirk on Derek's lips overrode my conscience. I held the envelope up to the light. I couldn't read the contents, but I could see the distinct outline of a payment slip. My finger slid under the flap. I tore it open. I pulled out the letter. It was dated 3 days ago. Dear Ms. Griffin, this letter serves as a formal notification regarding the default on your loan obligations secured by the property at 424 Elm Street, Lark Hill, PA. Despite our previous attempts to contact you, the past due balance remains unpaid. To avoid the initiation of foreclosure proceedings, the total arrears of $1,800 must be received by our office no later than June 1st. I stared at the number, $1,800, and then I looked at the monthly payment amount listed at the bottom of the statement. Monthly installment, $600. The world tilted on its axis. $600, the exact amount Marlene had demanded from Haley. She wasn't trying to teach Haley a lesson about the real world. She was trying to get Haley to pay her loan. But what loan? The house was supposed to be ours, hers, free and clear. My father had paid the mortgage off 2 years before he died. I remembered the burning of the mortgage papers at a backyard barbecue. I remembered the celebration. I looked closer at the letter. Harbor Crest Lending. This wasn't a normal bank. The logo looked cheap, predatory. I shoved the letter into my pocket as I heard the downstairs door open. "Claire?" Marlene's voice drifted out from the kitchen. "Are you down there?" I froze. "Yes." I called back, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Just getting the mail." I walked up the stairs, my hand clutching the letter in my pocket like it was a grenade. Rent starts tomorrow. Marlene had lied. Derek had smirked because he probably knew. And Haley, my brilliant, hard-working daughter, was being positioned as the collateral for a secret that threatened to swallow us whole. I reached the top of the stairs and looked at the closed door of Haley's room. I thought about the rental agreement with its curfew and its rules. It wasn't about discipline, it was about entrapment. Marlene needed a tenant she could control, a tenant who wouldn't ask questions, a tenant who would pay the $600 every month to keep the wolves at bay. I walked into my bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress. I smoothed the crumpled letter out on my lap. Harbor Crest Lending. I did not know what Marlene had done. I did not know why she had done it. But as I looked at that red final notice stamp, I knew one thing for certain. The peace I had tried so hard to keep was already gone. The war had started, and my mother had fired the first shot at her own granddaughter. I took a picture of the letter with my phone, then folded it carefully and hid it under my mattress. Tomorrow, I would find out who Harbor Crest Lending was. Tomorrow, I would find out why my mother was desperate enough to eat her own young. Rent starts tomorrow? Fine. But tomorrow, the investigation started too. The morning sun that filtered through my bedroom blinds felt intrusive. A stark contrast to the shadowy dread that had settled in my stomach overnight. The letter from Harbor Crest Lending burned a hole in my mind, even though it was safely tucked beneath my mattress. $1,800. The number played on a loop in my head like a bad song. I needed answers, and I knew Marlene would only give me walls. Marlene was a fortress of denial. If I wanted to find a crack in the foundation, I had to go to the person who usually held the mortar. I called in late to the dental office, blaming a migraine that wasn't entirely fictional, and drove to my brother's house. Derek lived 3 miles away in a development that had been built in the early 2000s, a neighborhood of beige vinyl siding and identical mailboxes. His truck was in the driveway, a hulking silver beast that cost more than my annual salary. I found him in his garage, tinkering with a lawnmower that looked brand new. Derek was a man who collected tools he rarely used, a performance of masculinity that required constant prop maintenance. "What are you doing here?" he asked, not looking up from the engine. "You are supposed to be at work. We need to talk about Mom," I said. Leaning against the doorframe, Derek snorted, wiping grease onto a rag. "We talked last night. Rent starts tomorrow. End of story." "It is not the end of the story." "Derek," I said, keeping my voice low, "I know about the money issues. I know she is desperate." He paused, his hand hovering over a wrench. He turned to look at me, his eyes narrowing. "What money issues? Mom is fine. She is just tired of carrying dead weight." I stepped closer. "Don't give me the company line. I am not a stranger. I see how she lives. She clips coupons for toothpaste but suddenly needs $600 a month from a teenager? That is not a lesson in responsibility. That is a panic move." Derek stood up, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked tired. The skin around his eyes was puffy, and there was a nervous energy to him that I usually only saw when he was dodging a bill collector. "You are overthinking it. Claire, that is your problem. You always have to make everything into a drama. Mom is just being Mom. She wants order. She wants things done her way." I held his gaze. "Is that why she is getting notices about deadlines?" Derek flinched. It was small, a tightening of the jaw. But I caught it. "She is not getting notices," he said, too quickly. "She is just reorganizing some things. She has been meeting with a guy at Lark Hill Community Savings. trying to get better rates on her accounts. That is all. It is financial planning. You wouldn't understand. Larkhill Community Savings. The name landed softly. A puzzle piece I hadn't expected. The letter I found was from Harbor Crest Lending. If she was meeting with Larkhill Community Savings, she was either trying to refinance or she was juggling multiple banks. Why would she need to reorganize accounts if the house is paid off? I asked. Derek picked up the wrench and turned his back to me. Go to work. Claire, leave it alone. You're going to give her a heart attack if you keep poking. I left, but I didn't go to work. I had a name now. Larkhill Community Savings. It was the bank my father had used for 30 years. It was the respectable, local institution where we had opened our first savings accounts as children. I drove downtown, parking my car between a bakery and the old cinema. The bank was cool and quiet inside, smelling of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. I walked up to the teller station. I didn't expect them to hand over Marlene's bank statements. I knew the privacy laws. But Larkhill was a small town. People talked. The teller was a woman named Sarah, someone I had gone to high school with. We weren't friends, but we were friendly enough to exchange pleasantries in the grocery store aisle. Hi, Claire, Sarah said, her smile polite but weary. What can I do for you? I leaned in, resting my elbows on the high counter. Actually, I am here about my mother, Marlene Griffin. Sarah's smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the computer screen and then back to me. Oh, I know you can't give me details, I said, lowering my voice, but I am worried about her. Sarah, she has been acting erratic. She is talking about deadlines and debts that shouldn't exist. I just need to know if she's okay. Sarah sighed, looking around to make sure her manager wasn't within earshot. Claire, you know I can't discuss a customer's activity. I could lose my job. I know. I said, I am not asking for numbers. I am asking as a daughter who is scared she's going to come home and find the sheriff putting a padlock on the door. Sarah bit her lip. She typed something into her keyboard, the keys clicking rapidly. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her brow furrowing. Look, Sarah whispered, leaning forward. I can't tell you what is in the accounts, but I can tell you that we have seen a lot of activity lately. And not just from her. What does that mean? I asked. It means the property isn't as simple as it used to be, Sarah said cryptically. There are multiple obligations tied to that address. It is messy. Claire, if I were you, I would look at the county filings. That is public record. I can't say any more. Multiple obligations. The phrase felt heavy, like wet wool. It wasn't just one loan. It was a web. I thanked Sarah and walked out into the blinding midday sun. My hands were shaking. I needed to understand the history. I needed to understand how we got here. I drove to my Aunt Joan's house. Joan lived on the other side of town in a small, clutter-filled cottage that smelled of lavender and cat litter. Joan was Marlene's younger sister. The soft one. The one who had spent her life in Marlene's shadow. When I arrived, Joan was in the kitchen making tea. She looked surprised to see me, her eyes widening behind her oversized glasses. Claire, is everything all right? Did Marlene kick you out? Not yet, I said, sitting down at her small kitchen table. But I think she is in trouble. Joan, real trouble. I told her about the rent demand, the letter from Harbor Crest, and what Sarah had hinted at the bank. Joan listened, her hands clutching her mug, her face paling. Oh, dear, Joan whispered. I knew she was stressed. She has been snapping at everyone lately. Joan, why is she doing this? I asked. The house was paid off. Dad paid it off. I remember the party. Joan looked down at her tea. Your father. He was a good man. Claire. But he handled everything. Marlene never wrote a check until the day he died, when he passed. She was terrified. Terrified of what? Of ending up powerless. Joan said softly, she saw what happened to our mother. She died with nothing, living in a state facility. Marlene swore she would never end up like that. She wanted control. She wanted a cushion. But a cushion is savings. I said, this looks like debt. Joan sighed, tracing the rim of her mug. After your divorce, when you came back home, that triggered something in her. Seeing you start over with nothing scared her. She felt like the family was crumbling. She started tightening her grip. She took over all the finances, refused to let anyone help. She said she had to protect the asset. Protect the asset, I repeated, by taking out high-interest loans? I do not know what she did. Claire, Joan said, her voice trembling. But I know she has been talking to Derek a lot. He has been advising her. Derek, I said, the name tasting like bile. Of course, I left Joan's house with more sympathy for my mother, but no more clarity on the facts. Marlene was acting out of fear. A deep, generational trauma of poverty and loss, but fear made people do dangerous things. And Derek was the kind of man who saw fear as an opportunity. When I got back to the duplex, Haley was waiting for me at the top of the stairs. She was sitting on the landing, her knees pulled up to her chest, scrolling through her phone. Hey, I said, trying to force a smile. How was your day? Nina called. Haley said, not looking up. Nina Calder was Haley's best friend. They had been inseparable since kindergarten. And, I asked, unlocking our door. Her parents want me to come stay with them for the summer, Haley said. She followed me into the kitchen. They have that guest room over the garage. Mrs. Calder said I could stay for free. She said it is stupid for me to pay rent here when I'm leaving in August anyway. I felt a surge of relief so strong it almost made me dizzy. The Calders were good people, stable people. Haley, that is wonderful, I said, turning to face her. You should go. It would solve everything. You can save your money. You can have a peaceful summer. No, Haley said sharply. I blinked. Why not? Because I am not leaving you here alone with her, Haley said. Her voice was fierce, protective in a way that made my heart ache. If I leave, she will just turn all that crazy on you. She will make you pay the extra rent, or she will find some other way to punish you. I am not running away. Mom, you are not running away, I said, grabbing her shoulders. You are going to college. You are starting your life. You do not need to be my shield. I am not your shield, Haley said, pulling away. I am your daughter, and we are a team. I told Nina I would think about it, but I'm not going, not unless you come too. I can't move into the Calder's garage. Haley, then I am staying, she said firmly. I will pick up shifts at the diner. I can handle Grandma. She walked into her bedroom and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen, feeling a mixture of pride and devastating guilt. My daughter was stronger than me. She was willing to walk into the fire to keep me from burning. I couldn't let her pay that rent. I had to try one more time to reason with Marlene. I waited until evening. When I heard the television go quiet downstairs, I went down the internal stairs and knocked softly on the door that separated our units. Come in, Marlene called out. She was sitting in her armchair, a crossword puzzle book in her lap. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp. It felt claustrophobic, the air heavy with the scent of old potpourri. Mom, can we talk? I asked. If it is about the rent. The answer is no, she said, filling in a square with a ballpoint pen. It is about a compromise, I said, stepping fully into the room. Haley got an offer to stay with the Calders for the summer. For free. Marlene's pen stopped moving. She looked up, her eyes narrowing behind her reading glasses. The Calders? Those people who let their daughter dye her hair pink? They are good people. Mom. And they offered her a place, but she wants to stay here. She loves you. She wants to be with her family before she leaves. So she stays, Marlene said, and she pays. Mom, please, I said, keeping my voice steady. She is saving for books. She is saving for a laptop. Taking $600 a month from her is going to cripple her start. How about this? She buys all her own groceries. She cooks dinner for you twice a week. She helps with the yard work, but no cash rent. Marlene slammed the puzzle book shut. You are doing it again, she hissed. Doing what? Turning her against this family. Marlene spat. You are whispering in her ear, telling her I am the villain. You want her to run off to the Calders so you can gossip about me to the whole neighborhood. Oh, poor Claire. Her mean old mother makes her daughter pay her way. This isn't about gossip, I shouted, losing my composure. This is about math. She cannot afford it. Then you pay it, Marlene shouted back, standing up. If you are so worried about her precious laptop, you pay it. But money comes into this house on the 1st of the month, or you can both pack your bags. I stared at her. Her face was flushed, her breathing ragged. This wasn't just stubbornness, this was panic. She needed that money. She needed it on the 1st because the bank, Harbor Crest, Larkhill, whoever, was coming for her. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. I went upstairs, my heart pounding in my ears. I was trapped. We were trapped. Later that night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tessa, Derek's wife. Can you talk? Derek is in the shower. I called her immediately. Tessa? What is going on? Claire, I shouldn't be telling you this, Tessa whispered. She sounded like she was hiding in a closet. But I heard you guys fighting earlier. I was dropping off some Tupperware on the porch and I heard Marlene screaming. She is out of control. Tessa, I said, she is demanding money she doesn't need. That is the thing, Tessa said. I think Derek is involved more than he says. What do you mean? I was looking for our tax returns yesterday, Tessa said. Derek usually handles them, but we needed them for the financial aid application for the kids' camp. I found a file on his computer. Claire, he registered a business at your address. My address? I asked. You mean the duplex? Yes. Griffin Hall in hand. It is registered to 424 Elm Street. Unit B. Unit B was my unit, the upstairs unit. Why would he do that? I asked. He doesn't live here. I do not know, Tessa said. Maybe for licensing? Or maybe to make it look like the business has an office? But Claire, he has been getting mail there too. Have you seen it? No, I said. Marlene gets the mail. She gets the mail. And she probably hands Derek's mail right to him. Claire, you need to be careful, Tessa said. Derek has been acting weird. He took out a loan for equipment recently, but I haven't seen any new equipment. If he used the duplex as collateral, he can't use the duplex, I said. He doesn't own it. Marlene does. Unless she signed something, Tessa said darkly. I heard a door open on Tessa's end. I have to go, she whispered. Just check the records. Claire. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the phone cold in my hand. Derek had registered a business in my apartment. Marlene was intercepting the mail. Loans were being taken out for equipment that didn't exist. The next morning, I was a zombie at work. I typed transcriptions with mechanical fingers, my mind a whirl of conspiracy theories. Around 10 o'clock, I took a break to get coffee. As I walked back to my desk, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, I ignored them, assuming it was a telemarketer, but today, every ring felt like a warning. Hello? I answered. Ms. Griffin? A woman's voice, crisp, professional, with a hint of a regional accent I couldn't place. Speaking, my name is Evelyn Sharp. I am a title researcher working in Bryan County. I am calling regarding the property at 424 Elm Street. My stomach dropped. Are you with the bank? No, Evelyn said. I am an independent researcher. I was doing some diligence on a cluster of properties in Larkhill for a client, and your name came up in a way that, well, it seemed unusual. Unusual how? I asked, gripping the phone. I would rather show you than tell you. Evelyn said, do you have any interest in the property history? Or, more specifically, the ownership structure? Yes, I do. Can you meet me? There is a coffee shop on Main. The Roasted Bean. Are you free in 30 minutes? I will be there. I said. I told my boss I had a family emergency, which was becoming the truest lie I had ever told, and drove to the coffee shop. Evelyn Sharp was sitting at a corner table. She looked like a librarian who moonlighted as a private investigator, sensible blazer, sharp glasses, and a stack of folders that looked heavy. Ms. Griffin, she said, not standing up but extending a hand. Thank you for coming. Claire, please, I said, sitting opposite her. You said my name came up. Evelyn opened the top folder. She pulled out a photocopy of a document. It looked like a deed, but denser. "Are you aware of the Larkhill Property Owners Network?" Evelyn asked. I frowned. I heard about them recently. My aunt mentioned they were pressuring my mother about code compliance. "Right," Evelyn said. "There was an anonymous complaint filed last week about an illegal business operating out of a residential unit. Griffin Hall and Hand." My breath hitched. Tessa was right. That complaint triggered a review. Evelyn continued. "But that is not why I called you. When I pulled the title to verify the owner for the citation, I found this." She slid the document across the table. It was a filing from the county recorder's office. The Griffin Family Housing Trust. Dated November 14th, 2018. "That date," I whispered. "That was 3 months after my father died." Evelyn nodded. "Look at the trustees." I scanned the list. Trustee, Marlene Griffin. Successor trustee, Derek Griffin. And the beneficiaries, Evelyn said, pointing to the bottom of the page. Primary beneficiary, Marlene Griffin. Secondary beneficiaries, Derek Griffin and Claire Griffin. I looked up at her. "I don't understand. If it is a trust, that means—" "It means the house is not just Marlene's," Evelyn said. "It belongs to the trust, and as a beneficiary, you have rights. But look at this clause here." She pointed to a paragraph in tiny print. "The trustee shall have the power to encumber the property for the benefit of the beneficiaries. Marlene can take out loans against it." I said, "Yes," Evelyn said, "but here is the kicker. This trust was set up to shield the asset, but 6 months ago, there was an amendment filed." She pulled out another paper. "Amendment to trust. Removed. Claire Griffin as secondary beneficiary." I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. "She removed me?" "It looks that way," Evelyn said. "But here's the problem. Claire, to remove a named beneficiary who is an adult, usually, there needs to be a notification or a signature acknowledging the change. Did you sign this?" She pointed to a signature at the bottom of the page. Claire Griffin. It was my name. It looked like my handwriting, but the loop on the C was too wide. The slant was slightly off. "I never signed this." I whispered, "I didn't even know this trust existed." Evelyn sat back, crossing her arms. "That is what I suspected. This signature is dated the same day a line of credit was opened with Harbor Crest Lending." "Harbor Crest," I said. "I found a letter from them. Marlene owes them money." Evelyn nodded. "It appears the trust was amended to clear the title of any complications, that would be you, so that the loan could be approved quickly. Lenders like Harbor Crest, they are fast, but they don't like messy titles with multiple beneficiaries. Someone wanted you off the paper so they could mortgage the house to the hilt." "Derek," I said. The name came out as a growl. "It fits." Evelyn said, "If he is the successor trustee, and you are out of the picture, the asset eventually flows entirely to him, and in the meantime, they can drain the equity." I looked at the documents. The betrayal was so precise, so bureaucratic. My mother and my brother had conspired to erase me from my own inheritance, forged my signature, and then, to add insult to injury, demanded my daughter pay rent to cover the loan payments for the debt they had incurred. "They have been lying to me for years," I said, my voice shaking. "Marlene said she was protecting the house. She said she was afraid of being powerless. She is not powerless," Evelyn said quietly. "She is leveraging the only power she has left, and your brother is guiding her hand." I looked at Evelyn. "Why are you telling me this? You said you work for a client." "I do," Evelyn said, "but I also have a moral compass. And frankly, the anonymous complaint about the business, it came from an email address associated with Griffin Hall and Hand." I froze. Derek filed the complaint? Against his own mother? Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Or perhaps against you? To create pressure? To force a situation where you would have to leave? If the city cracks down on code compliance, the illegal tenant, that would be you and Haley, might get evicted. Derek wants us out." I realized he wants the house empty. Maybe to sell it? Maybe to move in? Or maybe just to hide the evidence of what he is doing to the property before you figure it out? Evelyn said, I gathered the papers. Can I keep these? Copies, Evelyn said. I kept the originals. You might need a lawyer. Claire, I can't afford a lawyer, I said. Standing up, you might not have a choice, Evelyn said. I walked out of the coffee shop into the bright, indifferent sunshine of Larkhill. The town looked the same. The brick facades, the hanging flower baskets, the people walking their dogs, but the veneer had been stripped away. My family was not just dysfunctional. They were thieves. They were liars. And they had made a mistake. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the broken divorcee who needed their charity. They thought they could squeeze $600 out of my daughter, and I would just say thank you. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Marlene wanted rent? Derek wanted the house? I was going to give them something else entirely. I was going to give them the truth, and I was going to ram it down their throats. I started the engine. The confrontation was coming. But this time, I wasn't going to ask for clarity. I was going to bring the evidence. I drove toward the courthouse. I needed to see the filings for myself. I needed to see the forgery with my own eyes. And then, I was going home to set the table for a very different kind of dinner. The Bryan County Courthouse was a building designed to make you feel small. It was a block of gray stone sitting heavy in the center of the county seat, smelling of floor wax and old decisions. I walked through the metal detector, my purse clutched tight against my side, feeling less like a citizen and more like a trespasser. I had taken a half-day off work, pleading a dental emergency, which was ironic given that I worked in a dental office. My boss, Dr. Evans, had looked at me with sympathy, assuming I was the one in pain. He did not know that the ache was not in my teeth, but in the center of my chest, a gnawing anxiety that had not let up since my meeting with Evelyn Sharp. I found the records division in the basement. It was a fluorescent-lit room filled with rows of filing cabinets and a few computer terminals that looked like they belonged in a museum. I filled out a request slip, my handwriting jagged. I'm looking for filings regarding the Griffin Family Housing Trust. I told the clerk, a woman with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She took the slip, stamped it, and pointed me toward a terminal. You can look up the index there. If you need the physical file, bring me the case number. It took me 20 minutes to find it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Typing my mother's name, Marlene Griffin, the screen flickered and populated a list. There it was. Instrument number 2018-09442. Grantor, Griffin, Marlene. Grantee, the Griffin Family Housing Trust. Date, November 14th, 2018. I wrote down the number and brought it to the clerk. She disappeared into the back and returned with a thin manila folder. Here you go, she said, sliding it across the counter. You cannot take it out of the room. Copies are 25 cents a page. I opened the folder. The document inside was thick, the paper smooth and heavy. I skipped past the legal jargon, the definitions of property lines and easements, and went straight to the section labeled Beneficiaries. My breath hitched in my throat. There, typed in black and white, was the truth Evelyn had hinted at, but that I needed to see to believe. Upon the death of the grantor, the trust assets shall be distributed equally to the primary beneficiaries, Derek Griffin and Claire Griffin. I traced my name with my fingertip. Claire Griffin. I was there. I had always been there. My father had set this in motion before he died, and Marlene had finalized it shortly after. I was a 50% owner of the future of that house. But then I turned the page. There was a section for signatures. Marlene's signature was there, bold and loopy, and below it, a line for beneficiary acknowledgement. It was blank. I turned another page. Nothing. I sat back on the hard wooden chair. The trust existed. I was a named beneficiary, but I had never been told. I had never signed an acknowledgement. And if the document Evelyn showed me yesterday was real, the amendment removing me, then someone had forged a signature to take me out of a trust I did not even know I was in. I went to the copier in the corner. I fished a handful of quarters out of my pocket and copied every single page. The machine whirred and flashed, a rhythmic thump swish that sounded like a heartbeat. I had the proof. Now I needed the explanation. I drove back to Larkhill with the copies in a folder on the passenger seat. The sky had turned a bruised purple, threatening a storm that seemed to match the pressure building inside my head. When I pulled into the driveway, Marlene's car was there, but Derek's truck was gone. Good. I wanted her alone. I walked into the house through the front door, bypassing my upstairs unit. Marlene was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. The smell of bleach was overpowering. She scrubbed at a spot on the laminate with a ferocity that suggested she was trying to erase more than just a coffee stain. "Marlene," I said. She jumped, spinning around. "Claire, you scared me half to death. Why are you sneaking around?" "I am not sneaking," I said, tossing the folder onto the kitchen table. It landed with a heavy slap. "I went to the courthouse today." Marlene's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to me. Her face went rigid, that mask of stubbornness falling into place instantly. "And?" she asked, turning back to the counter. "I hope you had fun wasting your time." I walked over and opened the folder, spreading the photocopies out on the table. I found the trust. "Mom, the Griffin Family Housing Trust, the one you set up right after Dad died, the one that lists me as a beneficiary." Marlene scrubbed harder. "You are confused. Claire, you do not understand legal things." "I understand that my name is on this paper," I said, my voice rising. "I understand that half this house is supposed to be mine one day. Why didn't you tell me?" "It is just for estate planning," Marlene snapped, throwing the sponge into the sink. "It doesn't mean anything right now. It is just paperwork in case I drop dead. It is standard. Derek handled it. Derek handled it." I repeated. "Just like he handled the amendment that removed me? The one with the forged signature?" Marlene froze, her shoulders hunched up toward her ears. "I do not know what you are talking about," she muttered. "There is no amendment. You are making things up. You are hysterical. Claire, just like after the divorce, always looking for a fight." "I am not looking for a fight," I said, stepping closer. "I am looking for the truth about Harbor Crest Lending. I know you owe them money." "Mom, I saw the notice." "Are you trying to refinance the house? Is that why you needed me off the title? Because I have bad credit?" Marlene spun around, her face blotchy and red. "Stop it," she screamed. "You stop it right now. I did what I had to do. You do not know the pressure I am under." "Then tell me," I shouted back. "Tell me why you need $1,800 by the first of the month. Tell me why you are charging your granddaughter rent to pay a loan shark." "It is not a loan shark," she insisted, her voice shrill. "It is a bridge loan, just temporary, until things settle." "Until what settles?" Marlene pressed her lips together, her eyes darting to the side. She looked trapped, cornered in her own kitchen. "Get out," she whispered. "Mom, get out," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "Get out of my kitchen. You want to live upstairs? Fine, but you stay out of my business." I grabbed the papers. I was shaking, but not with fear, with clarity. She was terrified. She was hiding something so big it was eating her alive, and she would rather burn her relationship with me than admit it. "I will get out," I said, my voice cold. "But this isn't over. You are not going to drag Haley down with you." I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. I climbed the stairs to my unit, my legs feeling like lead. Haley was at the small kitchen table, her laptop open. She looked up as I entered, her face pale. "Mom?" she said, her voice small. "I just got an email." I dropped the folder on the counter and went to her. "What is it?" "It is from Barton Lake," she said, turning the screen toward me. Subject: urgent. Housing confirmation and deposit required. I leaned in to read. "Dear Haley, we are finalizing housing assignments for the incoming freshman class. To secure your spot in the residence hall, we must receive your housing deposit of $500 no later than 48 hours from this notice. Failure to submit the deposit may result in the forfeiture of your housing guarantee." 48 hours, 2 days. I checked the date on the email. It had come in an hour ago. I do not have $500, Haley whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I have $200 in my savings account. My paycheck from the library doesn't clear until next Friday. I felt a pit open in my stomach. I had spent my last spare cash on the car repair. We were living paycheck to paycheck, and my next check was still 4 days away. We will figure it out, I said, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. Do not panic. But Grandma wants $600 on the first, Haley said, her voice cracking. And now the school needs $500 by Wednesday. That is $1,100. Mom, I can't do it. I'm going to lose my spot. You are not going to lose your spot, I said fiercely. I promise you, we will find the money. How? Haley asked, looking at me with desperate eyes. I have some things I can sell. I lied. Mom, no. It is fine, I said, kissing the top of her head. Focus on your finals. Let me handle the money. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and put my head in my hands. $500. It wasn't a fortune to some people. But right now, it felt like a ransom. And Marlene wanted $600. I heard a heavy tread on the back stairs. The wooden steps vibrated. Someone was coming up to the landing. I went to the door and opened it. Derek was standing there. He was wearing his work boots and a collared shirt that was stained with sweat. He looked big in the small space of the landing, blocking the light. We need to talk, he said. His voice was low, a rumble that I felt in my chest. I stepped out onto the landing, pulling the door shut behind me so Haley wouldn't hear. I talked to Mom. I said, crossing my arms. Yeah, I heard, Derek said. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. She called me. She was crying. Claire, she was hyperventilating. You nearly gave her a stroke. Stop the drama. Derek, I said. I asked her about the trust. I asked her about the forged signature. Derek's face remained impassive, but his eyes went hard, like flat, dark stones. You are poking around in things you do not understand, he said. Mom is old. Her health is fragile. You keep waving papers in her face, accusing her of things. If something happens to her, that is on you. Do not put that on me, I said. If you were really worried about her health, you wouldn't be leveraging her house for your loans. Derek laughed, a short, sharp bark. My loans? You think this is about me? I am trying to save this place. Claire, Mom got herself into a mess years ago. I am the one cleaning it up. I am the one dealing with the banks. By removing me from the trust? I asked. By charging Haley rent? It is complicated, Derek said, waving a hand as if swatting away a fly. The bank needed a clean title. You having a claim? It complicated the underwriting. We had to streamline it. It is temporary. Once the refinance goes through, we put you back on. Simple. And the signature? I asked. The one that isn't mine? Derek leaned in. He smelled of stale tobacco and mint gum. You need to drop it. Claire, seriously, for Mom's sake, you push this. You blow up the financing. You blow up the financing. The house gets foreclosed on. Is that what you want? You want to be homeless? You want Haley to be homeless? He let the threat hang there. It wasn't physical, but it was violent all the same. He was holding our shelter hostage. Just pay the rent, Derek said, stepping back. Keep your head down. Let me handle the business. It is better for everyone. He turned and clomped down the stairs, leaving me standing in the humid evening air, shaking with rage. I went back inside. Haley was still at the table, staring at her laptop. I couldn't tell her about Derek. I couldn't add to her burden. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message. The number was unfamiliar, a local area code, but not a contact I had saved. If you want to know why rent starts tomorrow, ask about the second mortgage. I stared at the screen. The message was simple, direct. Who is this? I typed back. No response. I looked at the time. 7:15. Ask about the second mortgage. The anonymous tip felt too precise. Someone knew exactly what was happening. Someone who knew about the rent. Someone who knew about the debts. I grabbed my purse, I have to run an errand. I told Haley, I will be back in an hour. Mom, where are you going? To get us some answers. I said, I drove to the coffee shop where I had met Evelyn Sharp. I didn't know if she would be there, but I had her card. I sat in the parking lot and called her. Ms. Griffin? She answered on the second ring. I got a text. I said without preamble, from a burner number. It said to ask about the second mortgage. There was a pause on the line. Then Evelyn sighed. I am still at my office, she said. In Briar. Can you drive out here? It is about 20 minutes. I will be there. I said. Evelyn's office was in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. But inside it was neat and organized. She met me at the door, holding a cup of coffee. Come in, she said. We sat at her desk. She looked tired. The fluorescent light reflecting off her glasses. Harbor Crest Lending, Evelyn said, tapping a file on her desk. I did some more digging after we talked. They are not a bank, Claire. They are a private equity firm, a hard money lender. What does that mean? I asked. It means they lend to people who can't get loans from regular banks. She explained. People with bad credit, people with maxed out equity, they charge exorbitant interest rates, sometimes 12, 15%, and they specialize in bridge loans. Bridge loans? Short-term financing, Evelyn said. Usually 6 months to a year. The idea is you use the money to fix up a property or bridge a gap. Then you refinance with a traditional bank to pay them off. But if you can't refinance, they take the house. I finished. Exactly. And they are aggressive. The lien they placed on your mother's property is dated 4 months ago. It is for $50,000. $50,000? I gasped. What did she need $50,000 for? The house is in good shape. She drives a 10-year-old car. I do not know, Evelyn said. But here's the thing about bridge loans. They usually require monthly interest-only payments, and at 15% on $50,000. I did the math in my head. Roughly $625 a month. $600, I whispered. Evelyn nodded. That is the rent. She needs Haley's money to pay the monthly interest on the hard money loan. If she misses a payment, they accelerate the loan. They call the whole $50,000 due immediately. That is the deadline, I said. That is why she was screaming on the phone. She is behind. And the anonymous text? Evelyn asked. I showed her my phone. Ask about the second mortgage. This loan from Harbor Crest. It is a second mortgage? I asked. Technically, yes, Evelyn said. Even if the first one was paid off. This sits in the first lien position now. But the text implies there might be another layer. Or maybe they are referring to how the money was used. I thought about Derek. I thought about Griffin Hall in hand. I thought about the equipment loan Tessa had mentioned. Can you look up business filings? I asked. Specifically for Griffin Hall in hand? Evelyn turned to her computer. Give me a second. She typed rapidly. Here we go, she said. Griffin Hall in hand LLC. Registered agent. Derek Griffin. Principal address. 424 Elm Street. Unit B. Unit B. My apartment. Look for UCC filings. I said, for equipment. Evelyn clicked a few more times. Yes, she said. Here is one. Filed 3 months ago. Secured party. Industrial Finance Corp. Debtor. Griffin Hall in hand. Collateral. 1 Kubota excavator. Model KX040. An excavator. I said. A $40,000 machine. Does he have it? Evelyn asked. No, I said. He mows lawns. He has a pickup truck and a trailer. I have never seen an excavator. Then where is it? Evelyn asked. I stood up. I think I know what is happening. He took out a loan to buy equipment. He used the trust property, my home, to bolster his creditworthiness or maybe even as a guarantee, but he never bought the equipment. So where did the money go? That is the $50,000 question, isn't it? I said. I thanked Evelyn and left. My head was spinning. Derek had borrowed money for a phantom machine. Marlene had borrowed money from a shark. And they were using Haley to plug the leaks in a sinking ship. I needed to talk to Tessa. She was the only one on the inside who had shown a crack in the armor. I drove to the supermarket where Tessa usually shopped on Tuesday nights. It was a long shot, but I knew her routine. She liked the late hours when the store was empty. I found her in the cereal aisle, staring blankly at a box of bran flakes. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Tessa," I said softly. She jumped, dropping the box. "Claire, what are you doing here? I need you to tell me the truth," I said, picking up the cereal and handing it to her. "I know about the excavator. I know about the Harbor Crest loan." Tessa's face crumbled. She looked around the aisle, terrified. "Not here," she whispered. She abandoned her cart and walked toward the exit. I followed her out to the parking lot. We stood by her minivan, the sodium lights buzzing overhead. "He made her do it," Tessa said, her voice shaking. "Derek, he told Marlene he had a contract lined up, a big commercial landscaping job for the city. He said he needed the equipment to get the bid. But he didn't buy the equipment," I said. "No," Tessa said, wiping her eyes. "He used the money to pay off other debts. Gambling debts. Claire, online sports betting. He has been in a hole for 2 years. He told Marlene the excavator was on back order, and the Harbor Crest loan? That was to cover the payments on the equipment loan when the contract didn't come through." Tessa explained. "He just keeps moving money from one pile to another. He told Marlene if she signed for the bridge loan, he would have the big payout from the city within 6 months and pay it all off. She believed him. She always believes him." "And the rent?" I asked. "Why demand rent from Haley?" "Because Harbor Crest is auditing the loan," Tessa said. "They want to see proof of income for the property to extend the term. They needed a lease agreement. They needed to show that the units were generating revenue. It is all for show. Claire, the money Haley pays. It is just going to go right out to Harbor Crest to keep them from foreclosing." I felt sick. It was a Ponzi scheme built on family loyalty. Derek had gambled away his future, and now he was gambling with ours. "Haley is a prop," I said, "a line item on a spreadsheet." Tessa grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You can't tell him I told you," she pleaded. "He is on the edge. Claire, if he knows I talked, I do not know what he will do." I looked at my sister-in-law. She was a victim too, trapped in a marriage with a man who was drowning and pulling everyone down with him. "I won't tell him," I said, "but I am going to stop him." I drove home in a daze. The betrayal was absolute. Derek wasn't just incompetent. He was predatory. And Marlene was so desperate to save him, to save the image of her successful son, that she was willing to sacrifice Haley's future. When I got back to the duplex, the lights were off downstairs. I went up to our unit. Haley was waiting for me. She had packed a bag. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the duffel bag by the door. "I am going to go to Nina's," she said, her voice hollow. "Just for tonight. I can't be here. Mom, I can feel the tension coming through the floorboards." I sat down on the floor next to her bag. I felt a wave of exhaustion crash over me. "I found out what is happening," I said. I told her. Not everything. I spared her the gambling debts. But I told her about the loans, the fake business, the need to show income to the bank. "So I am just a fake tenant?" Haley asked, her voice quiet. "I am just paperwork? You are the only honest thing in this whole mess." I said. Haley looked down at her hands. "I feel like this is my fault. If I hadn't gotten the scholarship, if I wasn't leaving, maybe they wouldn't have panicked." "No," I said firmly. "This has been rotting for years. You graduating just turned on the light so we could see the cockroaches." Haley let out a dry, humorless laugh. "That is a gross metaphor." "Mom," I laughed too. A release of tension. "It is, isn't it?" We sat there for a moment in the silence of the apartment. I looked at my daughter. She was 18. She should be worrying about dorm room decorations and class schedules. Instead, she was worrying about foreclosure and fraud. "We need help," Haley said. "Real help, not just us yelling at Grandma." "You are right," I said. "I met a woman named Evelyn. She suggested I might need a lawyer." "We can't afford a lawyer," Haley reminded me. "There is a place," I said, remembering a flyer I had seen at the library months ago. The Keystone Family Advocacy Center. They handle civil legal aid, housing issues, elder abuse, financial fraud. Will they sue Grandma? Haley asked, fear creeping back into her voice. I do not want to sue her, I said, but I need to know my rights. I need to know how to stop Derek from draining the trust. I need to know if that forged signature can save us. I stood up and pulled Haley into a hug. You go to Nina's, I said. Get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow morning, I am calling Keystone. What about the deposit? Haley asked. The $500? I walked into my bedroom and opened my jewelry box. Inside, tucked in a velvet pouch, was a gold locket. It had been my grandmother's. My father had given it to me on my 16th birthday. It was the only thing of real value I owned. I took it out. The gold felt warm in my hand. I have it covered, I said, walking back to the living room. Mom, is that Grandma's locket? Haley asked, her eyes widening. You can't sell that. It is just metal. Haley, I said, squeezing the locket tight. You are the future. This is just the past. I put the locket in my purse. Go to Nina's. I said, I will pick you up tomorrow. Haley hugged me, burying her face in my shoulder. I love you. Mom, I love you too. Now go. She left, and the apartment fell silent. I was alone in the house that was half mine, yet not mine at all. I looked at the floor, imagining Marlene sleeping downstairs, dreaming of deadlines and debts. I imagined Derek in his house, checking sports scores on his phone, waiting for the next big win that would never come. They thought they could use us. They thought we were powerless women who would do as we were told to keep the peace. But peace was over. I pulled out my phone and looked up the number for the Keystone Family Advocacy Center. I wrote it down on the back of the Harbor Crest notice. Tomorrow. I wasn't just going to pay rent. I was going to serve notice. The waiting room of the Keystone Family Advocacy Center smelled like stale coffee and photocopy toner, a scent that I was beginning to associate with the dismantling of my life. It was located in the basement of a converted church on the edge of Larkhill, the kind of place where the linoleum was peeling at the corners and the posters on the wall offered advice on how to apply for food stamps or escape domestic violence. I sat on a folding metal chair, clutching my purse. Inside, I had the copies from the courthouse, the letter from Harbor Crest Lending, and the notebook where I had scribbled down everything Evelyn Sharp had told me. Ms. Griffin? I looked up. A woman stood in the doorway of a small office. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with sharp features and hair pulled back into a severe bun. She wore a cardigan that looked comfortable rather than expensive. I am Lena Parkhurst, she said, extending a hand. Come on in. I followed her into an office that was barely large enough for her desk and 2 guest chairs. Stacks of files were balanced precariously on every flat surface. I sat down, feeling the vibration of my phone in my pocket. I had ignored 3 calls from Marlene and 2 from Derek in the last hour. So, Lena said, opening a notepad, you mentioned on the phone that there is a trust issue? I took a deep breath. It is a mess. I said, my father died 4 years ago. My mother, Marlene, told me the house was ours, free and clear. But I found out yesterday that she put it into a trust. I am a beneficiary, or I was. I slid the papers across the desk. The original trust document, the amendment removing me, the signature that wasn't mine. Lena put on a pair of reading glasses and leaned over the documents. She read in silence for a long time, her face unreadable. Finally, she looked up. You say you never signed this amendment? She asked, tapping the paper. Never, I said. I didn't even know the trust existed until yesterday. And this lender? Harbor Crest? I showed her the foreclosure notice. Lena sat back in her chair. Taking off her glasses, she rubbed the bridge of her nose. Okay, she said, her voice measured. Here is the reality. Claire, if you are a named beneficiary in the original trust, the trustee, your mother, has a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest. She cannot just use the trust assets to secure high-interest personal loans that put the property at risk, especially if the purpose of the loan doesn't benefit the trust. And the amendment? I asked. If that signature is forged, Lena said, looking me dead in the eye, then we are looking at fraud, criminal fraud. And if she used that forged document to secure a loan, that is bank fraud. That is a felony. The word hung in the air. Felony. I felt a wave of nausea. I was angry at Marlene, furious even. But the idea of handcuffs and jail cells made my stomach turn. She was 65. She was my mother. I do not want to send her to prison, I said quietly. I just want to stop her. I want to save the house, or at least save my daughter from being dragged into this. Lena nodded, as if she heard this every day. We can handle this civilly, she said. For now, we can petition the court for an accounting. We can challenge the validity of the amendment. But Claire, you need to understand something. If your brother is involved, as you suspect, and if there are multiple loans, this house might already be gone. I thought about the excavator that didn't exist. I thought about the $50,000. I need you to keep this discreet. I said, if I go in guns blazing, my brother will burn everything down. He is volatile. I need to know exactly where I stand before I confront them. Lena made a note. We can do a quiet investigation. I can pull the notary logs for this signature. I can contact the lender to request the loan packet without alerting your mother immediately, acting on your behalf as a beneficiary, but you need to be prepared. When we pull that thread, the knot is going to tighten before it comes undone. I understand. I said, and your daughter? Lena asked. You said she is living there? She is supposed to start paying rent tomorrow. I said, to cover the loan payments. Get her out, Lena said firmly. Do not let her sign a lease. Do not let her pay a dime if she establishes tenancy under a fraudulent pretext. It just muddies the waters. Get her out of that house. Claire, today, I left the office with a mandate. The legal gears were turning. But the physical safety of my daughter was my job. I drove straight to the high school. Haley was in the library, finishing her shift. When she saw me walk in, she knew something was wrong. Mom? She asked, shelving a stack of biographies. We are going to the Calders. I said, right now. You are going to take that offer for the summer. Haley looked relieved, but then her face clouded. But what about you? I am not leaving you there with them. I will be fine. I lied. I need you safe. Haley, I need you away from the rent demands and the tension. If you are at Nina's, Derek can't corner you. Marlene can't guilt you. But I have to pack, she said. I have all my clothes, my books. We will go get them now. I said, a smash and grab. We will be in and out before Marlene cooks dinner. We drove to the duplex. The silence in the car was heavy. I could feel Haley vibrating with anxiety. It is going to be okay, I told her, squeezing her hand. This is the right move. When we walked into the foyer, the house was quiet. Marlene was likely watching her afternoon soaps. We crept up the stairs to our unit. Haley pulled her suitcases out of the closet. We worked fast, throwing clothes into bags, sweeping toiletries into a tote. It felt like we were fugitives. We were zipping up the last bag when the door to the internal stairs flew open. Marlene stood there, framing the doorway. She was wearing her housecoat, her hair slightly askew. She looked from the suitcases to me, and her face crumpled into a mask of pure betrayal. What is this? She demanded, her voice trembling. Haley is going to stay with Nina for the summer, I said, standing between Marlene and my daughter. Marlene's eyes widened. Leaving? She is leaving? She wants to be with her friends before college, I said, keeping my voice even, and the Calders offered her the room for free. It makes sense. Mom, for free? Marlene spat the word like it was poison. Nothing is free. Claire, you think those people are doing this out of the kindness of their hearts? They are laughing at us. They are looking down their noses at this family. They are just being nice, Haley said, her voice shaking. Grandma, please, it is just for the summer. You are stealing her, Marlene screamed. Stepping into the room, she pointed a finger at me. You are poisoning her against me. You are jealous because she has a future and you ruined yours. So you want to drag her down to your level. I did not ruin my life, I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. And I am not stealing her. I am protecting her. Protecting her from what? Marlene yelled. From her family? From responsibility? From your debts? I wanted to scream, but I bit my tongue. Lena had said to be discreet. From the stress. Mom, I said instead, the house is a pressure cooker. You are stressed about money. Derek is stressed. Haley needs to focus on getting ready for Barton Lake. Marlene's eyes narrowed. She can't leave. She said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We have an agreement. The rent starts tomorrow. There is no agreement. I said, she never signed anything. I need that money. Marlene shrieked, losing control. The deadline is the 1st. Why? I asked, stepping closer. Why is the deadline so important? Mom? The house is paid off, remember? Marlene flinched. She looked at Haley, then back at me. She realized she had slipped. It is taxes, she stammered, and insurance, and maintenance. The roof needs work. The roof is 5 years old. I said, just go. Marlene screamed, waving her hands. Go. If you want to abandon this family, go. But do not expect to come crawling back when those rich people get tired of you. She turned and fled down the stairs, slamming the door so hard the pictures on our wall rattled. Haley was crying silently. Let's go, I said, picking up the heaviest bag. We loaded the car. As I was checking the room one last time, I saw the rental agreement Marlene had left on the kitchen counter 2 days ago. I hadn't looked at it closely since that first night. I picked it up. Monthly rent, $643.50. I froze. The other night, she had said $600. But here, in the contract she had typed, it was specific, $643.50. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photo I had taken of the Harbor Crest notice. Arrears total, $1,930.50. Monthly installment, $643.50. 3 months of arrears. Exactly 3 months. It wasn't an estimate. It wasn't a round number for room and board. Marlene wasn't asking for rent. She was asking Haley to pay the exact penny amount of the loan payment she couldn't make. She had simply passed the bill to her granddaughter and changed the header to lease agreement. I felt a cold fury settle over me. It was so lazy, so entitled. She hadn't even bothered to round it up to make it look like market rent. I folded the agreement and put it in my purse. Another piece of evidence for Lena. I drove Haley to the Calders. Nina's parents, Bob and Susan, were waiting in the driveway. They were kind, solid people who hugged Haley and told me not to worry about a thing. We are happy to have her, Susan said, patting my arm. She is like a second daughter to us. Claire. I drove away feeling a mixture of relief and hollowness. My daughter was safe. But I was going back to the war zone. 2 days passed. The atmosphere in the duplex was toxic. Marlene refused to speak to me. She moved around the downstairs unit like a ghost, slamming cupboards and turning up the volume on the television whenever I walked in the front door. I kept my head down. I went to work. I communicated with Lena. Then, on Thursday evening, I got a frantic text from Haley. Mom, Uncle Derek is here. I called her immediately. Where? At Nina's? Yes. He is in the driveway. He is yelling at Mr. Calder. He says I have to come home. I am on my way. I said, I drove like a maniac to the Calder's house. When I pulled up, I saw Derek's silver truck parked at a crooked angle, blocking the Calder's SUV. Derek was standing on the lawn, his chest puffed out, pointing a finger at Bob Calder. You can't keep her here, Derek was shouting. She is a minor. She is 18. Derek, Bob shouted back, standing his ground. Get off my property. I screeched to a halt and jumped out of the car. Derek, I screamed. Derek spun around. His face was slick with sweat, his eyes wild. Tell these people to give her back. Claire, he yelled. She belongs at home. I marched up to him and shoved him in the chest. It was like shoving a brick wall, but he stumbled back a step, surprised by my aggression. Get in your truck, I said, my voice low and shaking. Get in your truck and leave before I call the police. She has to sign the lease, Derek hissed, leaning down into my face. The bank needs the lease. Claire, the review is tomorrow. If we do not show occupancy income, they pull the loan. So that was it. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the paperwork. He needed a signed lease to prove to the lender that the property was generating income, probably to refinance the hard money loan into something longer term. He was trying to use Haley's signature to commit mortgage fraud. She is not signing anything. I said, the bank can pull the loan. I do not care. You stupid bitch. Derek snarled. You are going to ruin everything. Bob Calder stepped forward, holding his phone. I have the police on the line. Derek, you want to wait for them? Derek looked at Bob, then at me, then at the house where Haley and Nina were watching from the window. He let out a string of curses that made me wince. This isn't over, he spat. He got in his truck and peeled out of the driveway, his tires leaving black marks on the pristine suburban asphalt. I apologized profusely to the Calders. Bob told me to stop apologizing and start locking my doors. I went home, but I didn't go inside. I had one more stop. The Larkhill Property Owners Network was holding their monthly meeting at the community center. It was a gathering of local landlords, mostly retirees who owned a few rental units. I knew about it because Marlene used to go, back when she liked to pretend she was a real estate mogul. I walked into the meeting room at the back of the center. There were about 20 people sitting on folding chairs, listening to a presentation on zoning laws. I waited until the break. I approached the secretary, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had known my father. Mr. Henderson? I said. Claire Griffin, he said, smiling. I haven't seen you since the funeral. How is Marlene? She is struggling. I said, actually, that is why I'm here. We received a notice about a code complaint regarding the duplex. An anonymous complaint about a business? Ah, yes, Mr. Henderson said, his face growing serious. Nasty business. That the city takes commercial use of residential zones very seriously. I know, I said, but we are trying to figure out who filed it. We think it might have been a mistake, a neighbor with a grudge. Mr. Henderson lowered his voice. Well, it was anonymous to the city, but the email that came to our intake form, it wasn't a neighbor. Claire, can you tell me? I asked. Please, it is tearing the family apart. Mr. Henderson looked around, then pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. Here, he said, the contact email for the complaint. I looked at the screen. Contact, admin@griffinhollandhand.com. It wasn't just Derek's business name, it was his domain. He had reported himself. Why? I asked. More to myself than Mr. Henderson. Well, Mr. Henderson said, scratching his chin. Sometimes people do that to force a vacancy. If the city condemns a unit for illegal use, the tenants have to leave immediately. It bypasses the eviction process. Much faster than going through the courts if you have a family member you can't get rid of. I felt the blood drain from my face. Derek didn't just want the rent. He wanted the option to kick us out. If Haley didn't pay, or if I caused trouble, he could use the code violation he created to have the city throw us onto the street. He was playing both sides. He was the arsonist and the firefighter. I thanked Mr. Henderson and walked out into the night air. It was starting to rain. I drove to Aunt Joan's house. It was late, almost 9 o'clock, but I saw her light was on. I knocked on her door. Joan opened it, wearing a floral nightgown. Claire, she said, clutching her robe. What is wrong? You look like you have seen a ghost. I need to ask you something. Joan, I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. And I need you to tell me the absolute truth. Joan led me into the kitchen. She put the kettle on, her hands shaking. Did you sign anything? I asked. Years ago, when Marlene set up the trust. Joan froze. She turned her back to me, staring at the stove. Marlene told me it was just a formality. Joan whispered, What did you sign? Joan? She said she needed a witness. Joan said, her voice trembling, for a modification. She said you were unstable after the divorce. She said if the house was left to you, Your ex-husband might try to go after it for alimony. She said she needed to protect the asset for Haley. So you signed as a witness? I asked. I signed a paper that said you waived your interest. Joan sobbed. She told me you knew about it. She said you agreed, but you couldn't come to the notary because of work. I closed my eyes. Marlene had manipulated her own sister into witnessing a forgery. Or maybe Joan hadn't witnessed my signature, but had simply signed an affidavit stating I had been removed. Joan, I said gently, Marlene lied to you. My ex-husband has no claim on my inheritance, and I never agreed to be removed. She used that paper to take out loans that are eating the house alive. Joan turned around, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God, I thought I was helping. She said it was for safety. I hugged her. It wasn't a comforting hug. It was two drowning people holding on to each other. She used us all. Joan, I said, she played on your fear and my vulnerability and Derek's greed. My phone rang. It was Lena Parkhurst. I pulled away from Joan and answered. Lena? I got the notary journal. Lena said. Her voice was crisp, professional, but with an undercurrent of excitement. And, the notary is a friend of your brother's, Lena said, a guy named Steve Miller. He runs a car lot in Briar. Of course he does, I said, but here is the smoking gun. Claire. I pulled the document that was notarized, the amendment removing you from the trust. Yes? The signature. Lena said, it is close. It is a good attempt. But whoever signed it spelled your middle name wrong. I blinked. What? Your middle name is Elizabeth, right? With a Z? Yes. The signature on the document spells it with an S. Elizabeth. I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. It was such a small, stupid detail. Derek, I said. He always spells it with an S. He sends me birthday cards addressed to Claire Elizabeth. He never remembers. It is definitive proof of forgery. Lena said. We have them, Claire. We can file for an emergency injunction to freeze the trust assets. We can stop the refinance. We can stop the rent demands. Let's do it. I said, file it. Wait, Lena said. Why wait? I asked. We have the evidence. Because if we file tonight, Lena said, Derek will know by morning, and a man who reports his own mother to the city and screams at teenagers in driveways is a man who doesn't go down quietly. He might try to liquidate other assets. He might try to transfer funds. He might try to destroy records. So what do? We need to catch them in the act, Lena said. We need to confront them when they are together, when they can't coordinate a new lie. Is there a time they will be in the same room? I thought about it. Monday, I said. Monday is the 1st of the month. The day rent is due. Derek always comes over for dinner on the 1st to collect Marlene's bills and help her write checks. Monday, then. Lena said, we will serve them on Monday, in person. I hung up the phone. I looked at Aunt Joan, who was wiping her eyes with a paper towel. It is over. Joan, I said, on Monday. It all ends. I drove back to the duplex. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the grime off the streets of Larkhill. I climbed the stairs to my empty apartment. It felt big without Haley there. It felt quiet. I walked into the kitchen and looked at the rental agreement I had left on the counter. $643.50. I took a pen and wrote across the bottom of the page in big dark letters, paid in full. But I wasn't going to pay with money. I was going to pay with the one thing Marlene and Derek had forgotten I possessed. My name, the name they had tried to steal, the name they had misspelled. I was Claire Elizabeth Griffin, and I was about to take my house back. Monday morning arrived with the heaviness of a verdict, the 1st of the month. In the world of landlords and tenants, it was the day the ledger had to balance, but in the Griffin household, it felt like the day the dam would finally break. I woke up early, though I had barely slept. The apartment was quiet without Haley. Her absence was a physical ache, a void in the air where her energy usually hummed. But the silence was also a strategic advantage. I could move without worrying about shielding her. I could fight without looking over my shoulder to see if she was watching. I dressed in my work clothes, black slacks and a blouse, as if armor were required for a conversation at a kitchen table. I checked my purse, the copies of the trust documents, the forged amendment, the business filings, and the rental agreement I had defaced were all there. I went downstairs at 8 o'clock. I knew Derek would be there. He always came over on the 1st, ostensibly to help Mom with the bills, but really to ensure the financial machinery he had built was still grinding forward. I walked into Marlene's kitchen without knocking. The scene was almost painfully domestic. Marlene was at the stove, stirring oatmeal. Derek was sitting at the head of the table, a calculator and a stack of envelopes in front of him. Tessa sat quietly in the corner, nursing a mug of coffee, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. "Claire," Marlene said, her voice tight. She didn't turn around. "You are early. I am not here for breakfast." "Mom," I said, remaining standing. Derek looked up, his face setting into a mask of aggressive boredom. "Do you have the check?" Derek asked. "Or did Haley leave it on the counter upstairs?" "There is no check." "Derek," I said, "and there never will be." Derek sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of disappointment. He put his pen down. "We went over this. Claire, rent is due on the 1st. If she is not paying, she is not staying. It is simple math. It is not math," I said, my voice steady. "It is extortion, and it ends today." I walked to the table and placed my hands on the back of the chair opposite him. "Haley will not sign anything," I said, looking from Derek to Marlene. "She will not pay a dime, and any discussion of rent stops right now. If you want to talk about money, we are going to do it with a neutral mediator present. I have the number for the Keystone Family Advocacy Center. We can set up a meeting for this week." Marlene spun around from the stove. The wooden spoon in her hand dripped oatmeal onto the pristine linoleum. "Mediator?" she cried out, her voice pitching up into hysteria. "We do not have time for a mediator. Today is the 1st. The payment has to go out today." "Why, Mom?" I asked, keeping my gaze locked on her. "Why today?" "Because of the deadline," she screamed. She looked wild, her hair escaping its pins, her eyes rimmed with red. "Harbor Crest set a hard deadline. If they do not get the 1800 by 5 o'clock, they start the proceedings." "What proceedings?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Foreclosure!" Marlene wailed. She dropped the spoon and covered her face with her hands. "They are going to take the house. Claire, I did what I had to do. I had to borrow the money to keep the lights on." Derek slammed his hand on the table. "Shut up. Mom, no. Let her talk," I said, stepping closer to Marlene. "You borrowed $50,000. Mom, where did it go?" "The lights do not cost $50,000. Marlene sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I needed it. There were expenses, medical bills, and the roof." And Derek said. Derek stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "That is enough," he roared. "You are hysterical, both of you." He turned to me, his chest heaving. "You want to know the plan, Claire? You want to know why I am the one sitting here doing the math while you play the victim upstairs? Because I am the only responsible one in this family." "Responsible?" I asked, incredulous. "You call a 15% interest loan responsible?" "I am fixing her mess," Derek shouted. "The plan is to refinance. I am going to put the house in my name, fully in my name, because Mom obviously can't handle it, and you are a financial wreck. You came back here with nothing. You always need help. You are a liability." "Claire." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. "You want the title?" I said. "That is what this is about. You want to strip the trust and take the house. I am saving the house," Derek insisted, "but to get the refinance. I need to show income. I need to show that the units are leased. That is why Haley has to pay. It is just on paper." "Claire." "It is just to satisfy the underwriters so I can get a conventional mortgage and pay off Harbor Crest. Just on paper," I repeated. "Just like the excavator was just on paper?" The room went silent. Tessa made a small, strangled noise in her throat. Derek's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I opened my purse and pulled out the file. I tossed the UCC filing onto the table. It slid across the lace tablecloth and stopped right in front of him. Griffin Hall and Hand, I read aloud. Equipment financing for one Kubota excavator, secured by the business assets. I looked at him. Where is the digger? Derek? Is it in the garage? Is it in the backyard? Or does it not exist? Derek stared at the paper. His face turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. That is business, he muttered. You do not understand business. I understand fraud. I said, I understand that you took out a loan for equipment you never bought, probably to pay off gambling debts. And when that money ran out, you convinced Mom to take out a bridge loan against her own house to cover your payments. Lies. Derek spat. That is slander. Is it? I asked. I pulled out the next paper, the printout of the code complaint email, and then, when you needed to pressure us, you reported your own mother to the city for a code violation. I said, you used your business email. Derek, admin at griffinhallandhand.com. You reported the illegal business to force a vacancy, just in case you needed to kick us out to sell the place empty. Marlene lowered her hands from her face. She looked at the paper on the table, then at her son. Derek? She whispered. You reported me? Mom. She is twisting it, Derek said, waving his hand dismissively. It was a strategy. To get the assessment lowered. It is complicated. It is not complicated, I shouted. You are cannibalizing this family. I turned to Tessa. She was staring into her coffee cup, tears sliding silently down her nose. Tessa, tell him, I said. Tell him what you told me about the rent documentation. Tessa looked up. She looked terrified, but there was a flicker of defiance in her eyes. She was watching her husband lie to his mother, and I think, in that moment, she realized she was next. I saw the emails. Derek, Tessa said, her voice barely audible. Derek whipped his head around. Shut your mouth. Tessa. No, Tessa said, standing up. Her legs were shaking. But she stood. I saw the emails with the broker from Harbor Crest. You asked him if a lease with a family member would count as income. He said only if you could show proof of payment. That is why you made Marlene write that contract. That is why you need Haley's check. It is not for the mortgage. Derek, it is to fluff your application so you can cash out the equity. You went through my computer? Derek snarled, taking a step toward her. I am your wife, Tessa screamed back, and I am tired of being afraid of the mailman. I am tired of you losing money we do not have. Derek raised his hand, a reflex of intimidation. Do not you dare, I said, stepping between them. Derek lowered his hand, but his eyes were pure venom. You are all crazy. I am trying to build something here. I am trying to create wealth for this family, and you are all too stupid to see it. You are not building wealth. I said, you are stealing it. I turned to Marlene. She had sunk into a chair. Looking small and broken, the revelation about the code complaint seemed to have shattered something inside her. She had thought Derek was her savior, her partner in managing the burden of the house. Now she saw she was just another asset he was trying to liquidate. Mom, listen to me, I said, kneeling beside her chair. I know about the trust. I know about the amendment. Marlene flinched, refusing to look at me. I know you forged my signature. Mom, I said softly, or you let Derek do it. Marlene squeezed her eyes shut. I didn't. It doesn't matter right now, I said. I am not going to call the police on you. I am not going to send you to jail. Marlene opened her eyes. She looked at me with a mixture of hope and confusion. But I have conditions. I continued. I will help you. I will help you restructure this debt. I will put my name back on the title if that helps with a legitimate refinance. I will contribute more to the household bills. I will help you save this house. Marlene gripped my hand. You would? After everything? Yes, I said, because this is my father's house, and because you are my mother, even when you are impossible. I stood up and pointed at Derek, but he has to go. Derek laughed, a harsh barking sound. Go? I am the trustee. I am the successor. You can't kick me out. I can if I file this. I said, holding up the copy of the notary log with the misspelled name. Elizabeth, you spelled it with an S. Derek, just like you do on my birthday cards. It is proof of forgery. It is proof of fraud. Derek's laugh died in his throat. He stared at the paper. If you step down as trustee, I said, and if you sign a quitclaim on any interest in this property, I will not file this with the district attorney. I will not report the fake equipment loan to the authorities. You can walk away. You can keep your truck. You can keep your secrets, but you cannot keep this house. Derek looked around the room. He looked at Tessa, who was refusing to meet his eyes. He looked at Marlene, who was staring at him with a look of dawning horror. "Mom," Derek said, "you are going to let her do this? After all I did for you?" Marlene took a deep breath. She looked at the kitchen table, where the oatmeal was drying on the surface. "You reported me to the city." "Derek," she said, her voice cracking, "you turned me in. It was strategy," Derek yelled. "It was betrayal," Marlene shouted, finding her voice. "Get out." Derek stared at her. For a moment, I thought he might violence. The veins in his neck were bulging. His hands were clenched into fists. "Fine," he spat. "Have it your way. Drown. See if I care. When the bank comes to padlock the door tomorrow, do not call me." He grabbed his calculator and stormed out the back door. The screen door slammed shut with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. The silence that followed was heavy and ringing. Tessa let out a long breath and sat back down. "I should go," she whispered. "I need to get the kids." She looked at me. "Thank you. Claire." She left, leaving me alone with my mother. Marlene sat at the table, staring at her hands. She looked 20 years older than she had an hour ago. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "About the excavator?" "Yes," I said. "And the signature?" she asked. "He told me you signed it. He brought it to me signed. He said you came by his work and did it to help me. I never signed it. Mom." Marlene nodded slowly. I believed him. Because I wanted to believe him. Because he promised he would fix it. "We can fix it," I said. But we have to be honest. How bad is it with Harbor Crest? "They want the 1,800 today," she said, "or they file the notice of default, and then the full 50,000 is due." I looked at the clock. It was 9:30. "I need to make a phone call," I said. I went out to the porch and called Lena Parkhurst. My hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "Lena," I said, "we had the confrontation. Derek is gone. Marlene is willing to cooperate." "That is good," Lena said. "But it doesn't solve the immediate problem. If the trust is compromised, and there are fraudulent loans attached to it, we need to stop the bleeding. What do we do?" "You need to authorize me to file for an emergency injunction," Lena said. "We need to freeze the title. We need to prevent Harbor Crest from foreclosing based on a fraudulent instrument. If we can prove the loan was obtained via forgery, we can pause the collection." "Do it," I said. "Claire, listen to me," Lena warned. "An injunction is public record. It will state that there are allegations of fraud within the family trust. It will name Marlene as the trustee who accepted the forged documents. It might trigger a criminal investigation. Even if you do not want one, the bank will certainly investigate." I hesitated. Marlene had just been broken. If I dragged her through a legal scandal, if the neighbors found out, if the police came knocking, it would destroy whatever was left of her dignity. "Is there any other way?" I asked. "Not if you want to stop a foreclosure that starts at 5 o'clock today," Lena said. "Unless you can pay the arrears. But even then, you are just kicking the can down the road. You need the injunction to invalidate the loan." I looked through the window. Marlene was wiping the table, her movements slow and mechanical. "File it," I said, my voice heavy. "But try to keep the language clinical." "I will do my best," Lena said. "I will head to the courthouse now." I hung up. I felt like I had just ordered an airstrike on my own home. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Haley. "Mom, did you get my email?" I hadn't checked my email. I opened the app. Forwarded. Barton Lake Housing Office. "Dear Haley, We have not yet received your deposit. Please note that the deadline is strictly 48 hours from the initial notice. If we do not receive the $500 by tomorrow at noon, your housing assignment will be released to the wait list. Tomorrow at noon. I had been so focused on saving the house, on fighting Derek, on protecting Marlene, that I had forgotten the immediate fire threatening Haley's future. I didn't have $500. I had spent my savings on the car. Marlene obviously didn't have it. Derek certainly wasn't going to give it to us. I looked at my hand. I wasn't wearing any rings. I had sold my wedding ring years ago to pay for the divorce lawyer, but I had the locket. I went back inside. Marlene was washing dishes. "Mom, I have to run an errand." I said, "I will be back in an hour." She didn't answer. She just kept scrubbing. I drove to the center of Larkhill, to a place called Ald Glitter. It was a pawn shop that tried to look like an antique store, but the bars on the windows gave it away. I walked in. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully. The man behind the counter was reading a newspaper. "Can I help you?" he asked. Not looking up. "I have something to sell." I said. I pulled the velvet pouch from my purse. I took out the gold locket. It was heart-shaped, with a small diamond chip in the center. Inside was a tiny picture of my father, smiling on a fishing trip. The man took it. He put a loop to his eye and examined it. 18 karat. He grunted. "Old style. Nice engraving." "How much?" I asked. "Scrap value?" "Maybe 300. It is an antique." I said, "It has sentimental value. I do not pay for sentiment." "Lady," he said, "I pay for gold weight." "I need 500. I said, "Please, it is for my daughter's college deposit." The man looked at me. He saw the desperation in my eyes, the dark circles, the cheap blouse. He sighed. "I can do 350. That is my top dollar. 350 wouldn't cover it." I looked around the shop. My eyes landed on my wrist. I was wearing a watch. It wasn't expensive, but it was a decent brand. A gift from my ex-husband in better times. "What about the watch?" I asked, unclasping it. He looked at it. $50. That is 400. I said, "I am still short." I dug into my purse. I found a pair of silver earrings I wore for work. I took them off. $10. He said. I stood there, stripped of my jewelry, stripped of my pride. $410. It wasn't enough. Then I remembered. In the glove box of my car, I had an emergency stash, a $20 bill and a roll of quarters for tolls. "I will take the 410. I said. He counted out the money, $20 bills. They looked greasy. I took the cash and walked out. I sat in my car and counted my glove box stash. $20, $10 in quarters, $440. I was $60 short. I put my head on the steering wheel and cried. I had just checkmated my brother, exposed a fraud, and launched a legal battle to save a house, but I couldn't find $60 to save my daughter's dorm room. I wiped my eyes. I couldn't give up. I started the car and drove to the library. I walked in and found the head librarian. "Mrs. Gable." "Claire?" she asked. "Is Haley okay?" "She called out today. She is fine." I said, "Mrs. Gable, this is going to sound incredibly unprofessional, but does Haley have any accrued pay?" "She just started the pay period." Mrs. Gable said, "But is there an emergency?" "She needs to make a deposit for college by tomorrow." I said, "And due to some family issues, the funds are tied up." Mrs. Gable looked at me. She reached into her purse, which was tucked under her desk. She pulled out a checkbook. "Who do I make it out to?" she asked. "No," I said, backing away. "I can't take your money. It is a loan." "Claire," Mrs. Gable said sternly, "Haley is the best worker I have had in 10 years. I am not going to let her miss out on Barton Lake because of a deposit. $60? $100? I need 60, I whispered. She wrote a check for $100. "Pay me back when you can," she said, handing it to me. I took the check. "Thank you. Thank you so much." I drove to the bank, not Larkhill Community, but a different one, and deposited the cash and the check into Haley's account. I used the mobile app to initiate the transfer to Barton Lake. Transaction successful. I sat in the parking lot and watched the confirmation screen. I had sold my father's locket, the one thing I had left of him, the one thing I wanted to give to Haley on her wedding day. It was gone, melted down for scrap. But Haley had a room, she had a future. I realized then that this was what being a parent was. It wasn't about holding on to the past, it was about feeding the future, even if you had to carve pieces off yourself to do it. I drove back to the duplex in the late afternoon. The sky was darkening again. The air felt heavy, electric. I found Marlene on the back porch. She was sitting in a rocking chair, staring at the backyard. The grass was overgrown. Derek usually mowed it. "Did you do it?" Marlene asked. "Did you stop the bank?" "My lawyer filed the injunction." I said, "Sitting on the steps. It should buy us some time. They can't foreclose while the title is in dispute." Marlene rocked back and forth. The wood creaked. Derek called. She said. I stiffened. "What did he say?" "He said I am dead to him." Marlene said, "He said I chose the losing side. You chose the honest side." "Mom." Marlene laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Honest? You talk about honesty like it is a prize." Claire. "Honesty is just a way to lose everything faster." She stopped rocking and looked at me. Her eyes were dark, shadowed by the twilight. "You sold the locket, didn't you?" I touched my empty neck. "How did you know?" "I saw you leave. You had that look, the look your father used to get when he had to fix something and didn't have the parts. I had to." I said, "Haley needed the deposit." Marlene nodded slowly. "You are a good mother, Claire, better than I was. You did your best." "Mom, did I?" Marlene asked. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You think Derek is the villain, Claire, and he is. He is greedy and he is weak, but he didn't start this." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You asked why I was so afraid of being powerless, why I was so obsessed with the trust in the house. It is because of what happened to Grandma, right?" "No," Marlene said. "It is because of your father." I frowned. "Dad? Dad was a saint. He worked at the mill for 40 years. He paid off this house." Marlene smiled. "But it was a sad, twisted thing. Your father was a gambler. Claire, just like Derek." The words hit me like a physical blow. "No," I said, "that is not true. He didn't bet on sports." Marlene said, "He bet on people. He lent money he didn't have to friends who never paid him back. He co-signed loans for cousins who disappeared. We were always on the edge. Claire, always. That mortgage burning party? We borrowed money from my brother to pay off the bank just so we could hold that ceremony. We spent the next 5 years paying my brother back. I stared at her, my entire childhood. The stability I thought we had. It was a mirage. The trust." Marlene continued. "The reason he set it up. It wasn't to protect the house from the government. It was to protect it from his creditors. There are liens. Claire, old ones, dormant ones. If we start digging too deep in court, if the injunction opens up the full history of the title." She trailed off. "What are you saying?" I asked, a cold dread seeping into my bones. "I am saying that Derek knew." Marlene said, "Derek knew about the old debts. That is how he got me to sign the papers. He said he could clean it up. He said he could hide the old liens with the new refinance." She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "If Derek goes down, Claire, if the law looks too closely at this house, we all do. The house isn't just mortgaged, it is poisoned." I sat on the steps, the concrete cold through my slacks. I had filed the injunction. I had invited the court to look. I had opened the Pandora's box to save us from Derek, only to find out that the rot went all the way down to the foundation. I looked at the house. It stood looming above us, a gray box full of secrets. "We have to fight," I said, though my voice sounded small. Marlene started rocking again. "We can fight," she said, "but rent is still due tomorrow, and now we have nobody left to pay it." The sun set, plunging the backyard into darkness. I sat there, listening to the crickets, wondering if I had just saved my daughter only to bury the rest of us. The fluorescent lights of the Keystone Family Advocacy Center buzzed with a low, electrical hum that seemed to vibrate against my teeth. We were seated in the mediation room. A windowless box painted a calming shade of sage green that failed entirely to lower my blood pressure. I sat on one side of the long, scarred wooden table. Lena Parkhurst sat beside me, a fortress of calm in her gray blazer, her files arranged in a precise grid. On the other side sat my mother, Marlene. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, shrinking into her cardigan as if trying to disappear into the weave of the fabric. She refused to make eye contact with me, staring instead at a water stain on the ceiling tiles. We were waiting for Derek. He was 20 minutes late. It was a power move, of course. Derek did not respect other people's time because he believed his time was the only currency that mattered. Finally, the door banged open. Derek strode in, bringing a gust of humid air and aggressive cologne with him. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny, carrying a leather briefcase that looked brand new. He didn't look like a man who had been caught in a lie. He looked like a CEO arriving to hostilely take over a lemonade stand. "Sorry I'm late," Derek said, dropping the briefcase onto the table with a heavy thud. He pulled out a chair and sat down, spreading his legs wide. I had to wrap up a call with the underwriters. Business. He looked at Lena, then at me. "So," he said, flashing a tight, condescending smile. "We are doing this? A formal meeting? It seems like a waste of resources for a family squabble." "Claire, but if you want to play lawyer, let us play lawyer." "Mr. Griffin," Lena said, her voice cool and level. "I am Lena Parkhurst. I am representing Claire in this matter regarding the Griffin Family Housing Trust." "I know who you are," Derek said, waving a hand. "You are the legal aid lady. Look, let me save everyone some time. I have the paperwork right here." He unclicked the latches of his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "This is the trust amendment," he said, sliding it across the table. "This is the rental agreement. This is the correspondence with Harbor Crest. Everything is above board." My sister is confused. She is emotional. She has been under a lot of stress since her husband left her, and she tends to reimagine things. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my mouth shut. Lena had coached me. Let him talk. Let him dig the hole. Lena didn't touch the papers he offered. She simply folded her hands on top of her own file. "We have copies of those documents, Mr. Griffin," Lena said. "We also have copies of the notary log from Mr. Steve Miller." Derek's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. "Steve is a good guy," Derek said. "He runs a tight ship. He runs a used car lot," Lena corrected. "And according to his log, the amendment removing Claire as a beneficiary was signed on November 14th. However, we have a time card from Claire's employer, Dr. Evans, showing she was clocked in and working a double shift that day until 8 in the evening, so she signed it later." Derek shrugged. "Or earlier. Notaries make mistakes with times. It happens. It does." Lena agreed, but they rarely make mistakes with names. She pulled out the blown-up photocopy of the signature page. The signature reads, "Claire Elizabeth Griffin," Lena said, spelled with an S. Derek stared at the paper. "Claire spells her middle name with a Z." Lena continued, "As shown on her birth certificate, her driver's license, and every tax return she has ever filed. It is a distinct misspelling. One that, interestingly, appears on birthday cards you have sent her in the past." Derek leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what? Maybe she misspelled it. People get nervous signing legal docs. It is a forgery." "Derek," I said, breaking my silence. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "You signed it, or you had someone else sign it." Derek laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "You are accusing me of forgery? Me? I am the one holding this family together. I am the one dealing with the banks." He turned to Marlene, pointing a finger at her. Tell them, Mom. Tell them you handled everything. Tell them you gave me the papers already signed." Marlene flinched as if he had thrown a stone at her. She looked up, her eyes watery and terrified. Marlene stammered. "She told me she got Claire's signature," Derek shouted, pounding the table. She said, "Handle it. Derek, fix the money. I just filed what she gave me." Lena held up a hand. "Mr. Griffin, please lower your voice. The timeline contradicts you. The loan application with Harbor Crest was initiated 3 weeks before the date on this amendment. You were listing the property as collateral before the alleged signature even existed. You were driving the process, not your mother." Derek's face turned a mottled red. "This is ridiculous. You are trying to pin this on me? I am the trustee. You are the successor trustee." Lena corrected. "Marlene is the trustee, and as such, she has a fiduciary duty, a duty you have conspired to breach." The door opened again. A woman walked in. It was Evelyn Sharp. Derek turned around. "Who is this? Another free lawyer?" "I am a title researcher," Evelyn said, walking to the table. She didn't sit. She stood at the end of the room, holding a tablet. "I was hired by a private equity group in Bryan County." Evelyn said, "They have been investigating a pattern of identity misuse in local property trusts." Derek froze. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. "Your name appears in 4 different trust filings in the last 2 years. Mr. Griffin," Evelyn said. "In each case, a family member was removed or a title was clouded just before a high-interest bridge loan was secured. And in 2 of those cases, the loans defaulted, and the properties were sold at auction to a holding company. A holding company linked to you," Evelyn added. The room went dead silent. The hum of the lights seemed to roar. I stared at my brother. It wasn't just us. He wasn't just a desperate gambler trying to cover a debt. He was a predator. He was stripping assets from families, his own included, to feed some insatiable need for cash or control. That is a lie. Derek whispered, "I am a consultant. I help people manage their estates by stealing their equity?" I asked. Derek stood up, his chair scraping violently. "I do not have to listen to this. This is a setup." He looked at Marlene. "You are letting them do this to me? Your own son?" Marlene slowly lifted her head. She looked at Derek, really looked at him, for the first time in years. She didn't see the successful businessman she wanted to see. She saw the wolf. "I trusted you." Marlene whispered, "You begged me." Derek screamed. "You came to me crying about the medical bills. You said you were going to lose the house." "I did," Marlene cried out, tears spilling over. "I was scared." She turned to me, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "It is true. Claire, I had debt, from before your father died, and then my hip surgery. The insurance didn't cover the rehab. It was thousands of dollars. I was drowning. And then I got the notice about the tax lien. You never told me. I said, I couldn't." Marlene sobbed. "You had just come home. You were sleeping in the spare room. You had lost your marriage. You were working 2 jobs. I didn't want to be another burden. I wanted to be the strong one. I wanted to leave you something, not a pile of bills. So you went to Derek." I said, "He said he could fix it." Marlene said, "He said he could make the debt go away. He said we just needed to move some paper around. I didn't know he was going to take you off the deed. I didn't know about the high interest. I just signed what he told me to sign." "And the rent?" I asked. "The demand for Haley?" He said it was the only way. Marlene wept. He said the bank would take the house if we didn't show the income. I was terrified. "Claire, I thought if Haley just paid for a few months, we would be safe." I looked at my mother. I saw the fear that had driven her, the fear of poverty, the fear of losing her status, the fear of admitting she had failed. It didn't excuse what she had done. She had tried to balance her ledger on her granddaughter's back. But it made her human. "I am not a villain," Derek shouted, interrupting the moment. "I was trying to save the asset. If I let the house go to foreclosure, nobody gets anything. I was leveraging the equity to generate capital." "That is how business works." "No," Lena said firmly. That is how fraud works. Derek sneered. You think you can scare me? Go ahead. Sue me. It will be tied up in court for years. The bank will foreclose before you ever see a judgment. And you, Claire. He turned his venom on me. You are going to be homeless. You and your little genius daughter. And I am going to report you for occupancy fraud. You have been living in that unit for years without a lease. That is theft of services. I will have the IRS audit you so fast your head will spin. I stood up. I placed my hands on the table. You are done. Derek, I picked up the file Lena had prepared. We are not just suing you, I said. We are filing a police report. For forgery. For bank fraud. And with Evelyn's testimony, for a pattern of racketeering. Derek's face went white. Racketeering? It is a Class B felony, Lena said casually. Mandatory prison time. Derek looked at the door. He looked at the windowless walls. He realized he was trapped. He looked at Tessa, who had been sitting silently in the corner of the room, clutching her purse. Tessa, let us go, Derek barked. We are leaving. Tessa didn't move. She stared at him, her eyes wide and wet. Tessa, Derek yelled. Move! No, Tessa said. Her voice was small, but it was clear. What did you say? Derek demanded. I said no, Tessa said. She stood up, her legs shaking. I am not going with you. Derek, I am not going to let you drag me into prison. I have kids. You are my wife, Derek screamed. You do what I say. Not anymore, Tessa said. She walked past him, giving him a wide berth, and headed for the door. Derek lunged for her, grabbing her arm. You are not going anywhere, I shouted his name, but it was unnecessary. Lena had already pressed a button under the table. 2 security guards who had been waiting in the hall stepped into the doorway. Let her go. Sir, one of the guards said, his hand resting on his belt. Derek released Tessa. She ran out of the room. Sobbing, we could hear her footsteps fading down the hallway. Derek stood there, breathing heavily. He looked at me, his eyes full of hate. You destroyed this family, he hissed. I hope you are happy. I didn't destroy it. I said, I just turned on the lights. Derek grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, shoving past the guards. We heard him shouting at Tessa in the hallway, a stream of desperate, angry pleading that ended with the sound of the main door slamming shut. The silence returned to the room. Marlene put her head on the table and wept. It was a guttural, ugly sound of total defeat. I walked over to her. I didn't hug her. I couldn't, not yet. But I put a hand on her shoulder. It is over. Mom, I said. Marlene looked up. Her makeup was smeared, her face ravaged by age and stress. He is gone, she whispered. My boy. He is gone. He was gone a long time ago, I said. I sat down next to her. Lena, I said. What happens now? We file the injunction, Lena said. We use the evidence of the forgery to invalidate the Harbor Crest lien. It will be a fight. Claire, they will try to collect, but with the criminal referral against Derek, the bank will likely pause everything to avoid liability. We can negotiate a payment plan for the legitimate debt, the medical bills, the taxes. We can save the house? Marlene asked, her voice trembling with hope. Maybe. Lena said, if you are willing to work with us, if you are willing to be completely transparent, no more secrets. I will, Marlene said. I promise. I looked at my mother. I wanted to believe her, but I knew that trust was like a mirror. Once it is broken, you can glue it back together. But you will always see the cracks. We can save the house, I said, but I'm not staying in it. Marlene froze. What? I'm moving out. Mom, I said. No, Marlene said, reaching for my hand. You can't. You have nowhere to go. I do. Actually, I said. I had signed the lease that morning. It was a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Marrow Glen, the next town over. It was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. The carpet was old and the view was of a brick wall, but it was mine. I had used the last of my savings and a small loan from the Calders to pay the deposit. I can't live under your roof anymore, I said gently. Not right now. The dynamic is too broken. You used your control over the house to hurt Haley. You used it to hurt me. I can't sleep there knowing that at any moment. You might decide to pull the rug out again, but I will be all alone." Marlene whispered, "You will have the house." I said, "That is what you wanted, isn't it? To protect the asset?" Marlene flinched. She looked around the empty mediation room. She realized that she had fought so hard to keep her walls that she had driven everyone outside of them. "I do not want to be alone," she said. "Then you earn us back." I said, "You go to therapy. You work with Lena to fix the finances. You treat us like family, not tenants." I stood up. "Haley and I are packing the rest of our things today. We will be gone by tonight." Marlene nodded slowly. She didn't argue. The fight had gone out of her. The drive back to the duplex was quiet. Marlene sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always did. Gray, imposing, stoic, but it felt different. It felt like a shell. Haley was waiting for us. She had come back from the Calders to help pack. She looked at Marlene with wariness, unsure if the grandmother or the landlord was walking through the door. "Hi, Grandma," Haley said cautiously. Marlene looked at her granddaughter. She saw the suitcases lined up in the hallway. She saw the boxes of books. "Hi, honey," Marlene said, her voice cracking. She didn't demand rent. She didn't mention the deadline. She just walked past Haley and went into her downstairs unit, closing the door softly. We spent the afternoon moving. It wasn't a lot of stuff. 7 years of life compressed into the back of a U-Haul van I had rented for 4 hours. Nina and her parents came to help. They formed a bucket brigade down the stairs, moving boxes with efficiency and cheerfulness that felt jarring against the somber mood of the house. By 6 o'clock, the upstairs unit was empty. I did a final sweep. I walked through the rooms, the living room where I had cried after my divorce, the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of budget meals, the bedroom where I had stared at the ceiling, worrying about the future. It was just a space now. The ghost of my fear was gone. I walked down the stairs and out to the van. Haley was already in the passenger seat, scrolling on her phone. I looked back at the house. The front door opened. Marlene stepped out onto the porch. She was wearing her house slippers. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cooling evening air. She looked so lonely, a queen in a castle of dust. I walked over to the porch. "We are going now." "Mom," I said. Marlene nodded. She looked at the van, then at me. "Is Derek going to prison?" she asked. "I do not know." I said, "Lena is filing the report. It is out of our hands." Marlene looked down at her slippers. "I am sorry." "Claire," she whispered, "I really am." "I know." I said. I turned to walk away. "Claire?" she called out. I stopped and looked back. "Will Haley still call?" Marlene asked. Her voice was small, like a child asking if they were still allowed to play. I looked at my mother. I saw the regret etching lines into her face. I saw the desperate need for connection that she had twisted into control. I looked at Haley in the van. She was watching us. She gave me a small wave. "She will call." I said, "When she is ready." Marlene nodded. She forced a small, trembling smile. "Okay. Drive safe." I got into the van. I started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror. Marlene was still standing on the porch, watching us go. She stood there until we turned the corner and the house disappeared from view. We drove toward Marrow Glen. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. "How do you feel?" Haley asked, looking over at me. I took a deep breath. My bank account was empty. My brother was likely a felon. My mother was broken. I was starting over at 33 with a futon and a box of dishes. "I feel light," I said, and I meant it. The rent had been paid, not with money, but with the truth. And for the first time in my life, the road ahead didn't belong to my mother, or my brother, or a bank. It belonged to us. Thank you so much for listening to My Daughter Graduated with Honors, Mother's Response. Start paying rent tomorrow. The family. I hope you enjoyed this journey of secrets, betrayal, and finally, liberation. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below and tell me where in the world you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode. What did you think of Claire's decision to move out? Do you think Marlene deserves forgiveness? Share your thoughts in English in the comments section. Until next time, stay safe and keep telling your truth.